Welcome! Today we're going to dig into the incredible ancient history of North Carolina's first peoples. And believe me, it's a story that starts way, way before any written history. It's a real-life mystery.
So let's just dive right in. How on earth can we know anything about people who lived 12,000 years ago? I mean, they didn't leave behind any books or letters or diaries. It's a really good question, right?
Well, the answer comes from a special kind of detective, the archaeologist. And instead of looking for fingerprints, they hunt for artifacts, the tools, the pottery, and even the garbage that people left behind thousands and thousands of years ago.
And through all that digging and detective work, they've pieced together a story that goes back an unbelievable 12,000 years. Just to give you some perspective, that is thousands of years before the Great Pyramids in Egypt were even a thought.
Okay, so if you're going to solve a mystery this old, you need a map. But not a map of a place, you need a map of time. And luckily for us, archaeologists have already made one.
They've basically broken down this huge stretch of time into 4 major periods. We're going to start at the very beginning, with the Paleo-Indian period, and we'll just work our way forward, and you'll get to see how life changed in each new era.
The very first clues we have aren't words in a book, they're stones. To be specific, stone tools found at these incredible sites like Hardaway, right on the Yadkin River. You can think of these places as time capsules, just buried in the dirt.
An amazing archaeologist, Dr. Billy Oliver, called these sites the cornerstones of everything we know. But he also used a much simpler and kind of brilliant analogy, a layer cake. Every single layer of soil is like a different slice of time, holding clues from the people who lived there.
And hey, just like with a real cake, the oldest part is at the bottom. So the deeper an archaeologist digs, the farther back in time they're going, all the way down to the very first people who ever walked this land. So in those oldest, deepest layers, the clues start to paint a really cool picture of the Paleo-Indians. These were expert hunters, living in small groups, always on the move, following huge animals like mammoths and ancient bison across a North Carolina that looked very different from today.
But here's a fun little puzzle. How can we be sure a stone point was actually used for a spear? Well, the truth is, we can't, because these early people were incredibly smart, and a single stone point wasn't just one tool, it was a bunch of tools in one.
The answer all comes down to how it was hafted. That's just the fancy word for how you attach the stone point to a handle. You stick it on a long wooden shaft, and boom, it's a spear. But attach that same stone point to a short little handle, and now you've got a knife. Pretty clever, huh? It's like a prehistoric multi-tool.
Okay, so as thousands of years go by, the climate gets warmer. Those giant Ice Age animals start to disappear. People enter what's called the Archaic period, and they had to adapt. They learned to hunt smaller animals like deer and find new plants to eat. And all of this adaptation, it set the stage for one of the biggest shifts in all of human history.
This new world led to new technology. For centuries, hunters used a spear and an atlatl, which is this really cool tool that acts like an extension of your arm, letting you throw a spear way harder and faster. But then, during the Woodland period, a brand new invention showed up that was a total game changer: the bow and arrow.
But an even bigger clue that life was really changing came from something you might just see as old trash, little broken pieces of clay pots. To an archaeologist, though, this stuff is pure gold.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Pottery is heavy, and it breaks really easily. You're not going to pack up a bunch of clay pots if you're wandering around all the time, right? So finding pottery tells archaeologists that people were starting to settle down, build more permanent villages, and begin one of the most important things ever: farming.
So, as people start settling down, these small villages begin to grow. And with that growth came new ways of organizing society, which led to the creation of North Carolina's very first towns.
So let's jump forward to about 1,000 years ago, to what's called the Mississippian period. This is when we see the rise of North Carolina's first real towns. And we're not just talking about a few houses. These were large, planned communities, often with these huge earthen mounds for temples and homes for their leaders.
This new way of living was organized into something we call chiefdoms. You'd have a powerful chief who would rule the main town and all the smaller villages around it, creating these really complex trade routes and a much more structured government.
Now, over hundreds of years, these chiefdoms evolved, and by the 1500s, they had formed into the distinct tribal nations that would eventually meet the first European explorers. So let's get to know the 3 largest groups right here in the state.
Out in the east,
The Tuscarora were the masters of the coastal plain. Just picture it. Villages built all along these wide, slow-moving rivers, with giant canoes carved from a single cypress log, some of them big enough to hold 20 people, gliding through the water for trade and travel. Then, if you moved inland to the Piedmont Hills, you'd find the Catawba, the people of the river. They were such skilled fishers, they built these clever V-shaped stone dams called weirs that would actually funnel fish right into their nets. Plus, their control over the area's trade routes made them incredibly powerful and respected.
And finally, we head into those beautiful western mountains. This was the home of the Cherokee. Their nation was huge, covering 40,000 square miles across several states. They built permanent towns with strong log homes, and their society was one of the most powerful and complex in the entire Southeast.
So, after all these thousands of years of history, after all these different cultures and amazing tribes, what happened? Did these people just disappear?
But here is maybe the most important thing to understand in this whole story. They never vanished. This isn't a story about a lost people. It's a story of continuation. There's a direct line. The Paleo-Indians' children and grandchildren became the Arctic people, who then evolved into the woodland cultures, and their descendants, they are the members of North Carolina's tribal nations today.
This history isn't just something you find in a museum. It's a living heritage. You know, as Jerry Wolf of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee explains, this deep connection to the land and to the past is such a vital part of their culture, this belief that everything and everyone is connected.
And this whole incredible 12,000-year story took place right here in North Carolina. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? The next time you're walking in a field or maybe along a river, what clues to a hidden past might be waiting right under your feet?